This time on Watchers of Tomorrow, the high cost of bigotry.
Hello everybody, welcome to Watchers of Tomorrow, the sci-fi review critique show where we're putting the humanities back into science fiction. My name is Gep, and I am joined as always by my friend and co-host Dr. Isix.
Hi.
And this week we watched probably the most iconic episode of original Star Trek. Like, at least for the aliens involved. This is like the one. If you say original Star Trek aliens, this is the alien that pops into your head.
Oh, either that or the Gorn.
It's one of those two.
Yes. This is the other one, the other weird alien.
What if I said original Star Trek alien and racism?
Dun, dun, dun. Then yeah, you'd be 100% correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is Let That Be Your Last Battlefield.
Well, hopefully it is, because fighting kind of sucks.
Yeah, this is a very weird title, but sure.
Kind of fitting, though, in a way.
Based on a story by Gene L. Kuhn, who was again writing under his pen name for season 3, but the actual screenplay was written by Oliver Crawford, who has a somewhat interesting career where he was blacklisted in the McCarthy era for not wanting to throw a bunch of his friends under the bus as communist sympathizers. He then later came back to Hollywood, wrote on every TV show that you remember from the 60s, and later became the chair of the Writers Guild Association of America, and even removed a lot of McCarthy-era, like, anti-communist loyalty pledges from the Writers Guild of America.
Oh, damn, that's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
There was so much nonsense there. It's like, yeah, I'm done with this. You guys are too.
I also thought it was interesting. He wrote a book in 1978. He wrote a novel called The Execution, which, according to one review I found, was described as a sewery exploitive stew.
I'm not sure if that's good or bad.
It's pretty bad. I don't want to go into any details because it's very, very bad. Very, very, very bad. And I mention it because there's some, like, also, like, not amazing parts of this episode.
Yes. We'll get into them as they pop up, yes.
So we have two guest stars this week. First is Lou Antonio playing Loki.
Loki, which I spelled Loki a few times in my notes. So if I get confused, that's what's up.
He is best known for movie roles in Cool Hand Luke and America, America, the best American film of the year.
America, America.
I just loved that poster. It's like, America, America, the best America film.
I believe Lou here went off to be a director in time.
Yes, he did direction. He was also on a lot of similar era TV shows, like The Flying Nun, The Virginian, which we've heard of before. Something called The Wackiest Ship in the Army.
Oh, dear. Well, there was a sort of collection of, military-themed humor shows, like, basically after World War II until, like, the 80s or something like that.
Yeah, Hogan's Heroes and...
Hogan's Heroes, F Troop.
Desert Rats? What was that? With the Jeeps?
Maybe? There's also, from the UK side of things, Dad's Army, which I enjoyed. It was basically the older folks that, it's like, we want to help with the war. It's like, well, you're kind of old, so we'll set you up to just guard England while the rest of us go overseas.
Our other guest star is Frank Gorshin, who played Commissioner Beale.
Wait a moment. Does he know Allie Mick? Probably not, actually. But he played most famously the Riddler, correct?
Yes, he was the Riddler in the 1960s era Batman. He was primarily known as a stand-up comedian and impressionist who did a lot of talk show circuits during the 60s.
And in fact, the bunch of his credits here is for the Ed Sullivan Show. So yes, he was also on The Virginian.
Everyone was on Virginian, apparently. But yes, also the Riddler. Also, this is our second 60s era Batman actor in 2 episodes.
I'm seeing a trend here. Are we going to get everyone here, or is this...
I hope so. Oh my god, what if like we just didn't know that Adam West shows up in one of these episodes? That would be amazing. I doubt it, but wouldn't that just be the best thing to learn?
Be fantastic. It's like, wait a moment. Even if he's just like in the background, that'd be great.
I feel like I would have 100% heard of it, but
it's like, yeah, there's Adam West in the background there. Holy smokes, it's true.
Wait a minute, that yeoman in the skirt, it's Adam West.
Adam West. 60s Batman is pretty much a hoot.
Yeah, it is. Okay, I don't know what to make of this one. It's like very badly done, so it might not take that long, but I feel like the actual politics of it are going to take forever.
Oh, yeah, pretty much. So, shall I start with the captain's log?
Go ahead.
Captain's log. Ariana's got attacked by bacteria. We shall decontaminate.
So the Enterprise is en route to some planet called Arianas that has a bacterial infection that they need to decontaminate from orbit.
It's a pretty neat trick if you can pull it off.
I know. It's weird. They can they're basically, I don't know, crop dusting from space.
Yes. Which honestly seems a little far-fetched, but yeah, this is maybe a minor quibble about the episode.
Yep. One of many.
We'll just roll with it.
On the way, they detect a Federation shuttlecraft. In fact, the same shuttlecraft that was reported stolen from Starbase 4 a matter of weeks ago.
So somebody is enjoying their Grand Theft shuttlecraft and has finally ran out of gas.
Yes, the shuttle is flying erratically with one humanoid aboard who seems badly injured. Kirk orders it to be tractored into the shuttle bay. Once on board, a man stumbles out and falls, revealing him to be bifurcated, half black and half white, which the episode thinks is just the coolest thing.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, he falls down, and all you can see is like the black side of his face, and then he turns over so you can see that he also has a white side of his face. It was and then cuts to commercial.
Guys, look at this. Like, well, this is totally shocking because reasons. Well, I will say I am a little surprised it wasn't any of the cast of any of the Grand Theft Auto games, so, you know, I guess that fits. For, you know, it's like, well, this is not what we expected, guys.
So in sickbay, the crew speculate on how a being with two-colored skin could have possibly evolved anywhere ever. It is baffling to them.
Well, it is a little weird, because I guess what's the evolutionary advantage for that, other than, you know, like maybe attracting mates?
Yeah,
maybe?
Something like that is almost 100% just sexually selected. Anytime you see something weird that may even like detract from a creature's survivability, it is sexually selected. Like that, it's pretty easy.
So somebody found this attractive, you know, in the thousands upon thousands of years ago, and then suddenly that's what you got.
Yeah, not difficult. Anyway, McCoy decides this guy must be some random freak mutation or something.
Well, I guess maybe it started that way, and then someone thought it was cool, and, you know, and the rest of that, of course. But McCoy, you should know better about evolution or something like that.
All evolution is random mutation.
Yes. It's like it's kind of how it kicks off variances, and that's just, and then they just kind of roll with it. It works.
The man wakes up and introduces himself as Lokai of Sharon.
Sharon!
Kirk is immediately hostile, lambasting him for having stolen a shuttlecraft, but Lokai is understandably upset at this because he's insistent that he didn't, in fact, steal the shuttle. He was just using the shuttle, which he draws a definite distinction between. Kirk really doesn't care how he got it, if he stole it, if he found it, if someone gave it to him, or what. He just does not care.
It's still stolen property, guy. So, did you take it from the starbase? Did you fly it all the way here? Or did you just stumble across it and run off with it from somebody else who stole it?
No, it doesn't matter. He's near it. He's near something that was stolen.
And thus, you are automatically suspect.
This will become important later. Yes. Then Kirk suddenly goes like, but you know what? We're explorers. Let's learn about your people. And Lokai, who's just finished being yelled at by Kirk for being near stolen property, is like, I don't necessarily want to talk to you about my people. And Kirk goes, fine, be evasive.
It's like, well, you guys seem to be interested in abusing me, so maybe screw you guys. I'm going to be shutting up now.
Yep. Kirk is then called away because Chekhov has discovered another ship.
Was this an epic vessel traveling, a warp of 50,000 coming straight towards them that's going to be a terror and hover in front of the screen for minutes on end, blinking lights and everything?
It does exactly that, except that it's also invisible.
Oh, okay. I guess it's cheaper that way.
Yeah, they don't see it, but it's definitely there, and it is definitely on a collision course.
Yeah, this is just such a obvious we ran out of money sort of move here, but okay.
And they do the same thing, I guess because they didn't know whether they'd have a model, maybe, but they do the same sort of thing where they just like stare at the screen and go, we can't get around it, but like there's just nothing on the screen.
Yes. Maybe they're waiting for like a distortion effect or maybe just a big flash or something like that. I don't know.
So the ship collides with the Enterprise and nothing happens.
Oh, well, I guess that was a whole lot of nothing. Sensor ghost, maybe? Wait, it's the Romulans hiding out there again?
So the ship disappears, but then suddenly there's another black and white man on the bridge.
This must be Beale.
And then Kirk turns to McCoy and goes, mutation, huh?
Yes, Captain. Obviously, you had a twin brother. Yeah.
This is Beale, who is a space cop from Sharon.
Well, it's about time the cops showed up. We got this stolen shuttlecraft business. Oh, wait, you're not a Federation.
He apparently pushed his ship that is super special and high-tech and also has invisible paint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It disintegrates properly.
They didn't have to make a model.
Yes. And this is kind of amazing. It's like, yeah, and the ship just sort of disintegrated, and there's nothing left. And don't even try to look for parts of it where it's not going to matter.
Yeah, they even just handwaves like, this ship was cool. Yes, it had a special coating that made it invisible. Behold my invisible ship. Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman.
Anyway, he has been pursuing Lokai, as it turns out later, for thousands of years. I didn't have a good way to work that into the script, but later on it's like 50,000 years or some odd.
I guess they're really old too, so all right, this guy's pretty weird.
He claims Lokai in the name of whatever law he's supposedly enforcing, but Kirk's in charge and he says so.
Okay, well, this is Kirk's jurisdictions, Federation ship. You don't really have command here, but maybe you can sort of start looking into an extradition situation, maybe.
Then Beale goes, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be giving orders, and goes, ha, someone respecting my authority. Oh, it feels so good.
So nice. Yes, tell me I'm in charge again.
You think we're overstating it, but...
Well, I guess over the course of this episode, Kirk being super happy about this at this point is kind of him sort of knowing what's going to be happening later in the episode and being really happy that he has at least control down.
They bring Beale to sickbay so that he can confront Lokai. Lokai immediately starts yelling about how this guy's a murderer who oppresses his people. And, his people were enslaved and then later oppressed by Beale's people. And Beale goes, no, we were compassionate and we cared for you hopeless people and took you into our hearts as slaves.
I don't know. I think that is probably good enough reason to point out that Beale's side is probably full of crap.
Probably. But apparently Lokai is a revolutionary leader who has been, sending out propaganda or some junk. He's against this whole slavery and oppression thing.
Thus is also bad, apparently.
He also requests asylum because the space cops just showed up.
Maybe you should have tried this earlier because you were under pursuit and stuff, and yeah.
But Kirk doesn't care about the space cops, the slavery, the oppression, or the asylum. Everyone's just being rude, and he wants them all to shut up.
You guys are getting annoying. Just stop being annoying, man.
He wants to get on with his mission, but then, of course, the ship starts to go off somewhere all by itself, because nothing can be easy for Kirk here.
All right, so are we stuck in a tractor beam, a wormhole, some sort of super powerful, brain fungus on the hull now? What's up?
Well, apparently the ship has changed course to take them to Sharon, and Beale comes to the bridge and goes, yeah, it was me. I got mental powers. Do something about it.
Okay, you have mental powers now. That's new.
And there's, nothing they can do, because he's just too good, basically. Lokai enters and goes, see, he's kind of forcibly taking control of your ship. Maybe this is evidence that you should be on my side and get rid of him. Kirk goes, you two are equally wrong.
Kirk. You SOB here. Someone just has both given you evidence and reason not to trust them, and the other person has pointed out why you should not trust them based on that same evidence. You don't get to say you're both untrustworthy and terrible.
Yeah, he literally says, you're two of a kind. When Loki comes in and says, see what he's doing, you should kill him now before it gets worse. Which, I'll admit, just going, we should kill him now before he gets worse is a somewhat extreme position. But it's certainly you don't have to go, oh, we should listen to him and kill him. But maybe yeah, you're kind of right. We should deal with this guy.
Yeah, we should maybe get him to give up control of the ship, maybe knock him out, maybe throw him in that shuttlecraft you ran off with and just sort of leave him here.
Yeah.
So let someone else deal with this.
Kirk orders both of them be shot, but they both have some sort of personal force field that renders their weapons useless anyway.
Well, that's a new power. Okay, what else have they got?
Kirk demands that Beale give back control of the ship, and when he refuses, Kirk threatens to set the self-destruct rather than let Beale take the ship. Beale thinks Kirk is bluffing, so Kirk, Spock, and Scotty all begin the arduously long task of setting the self-destruct.
1A, 2B, commit.
Yeah, each of them has to give a security code. The computer has to process the code, confirm the code, then ask for the next code. I timed this out, and it takes 5 minutes of episode runtime for them to finish this process, which is not exactly intimidating.
Nope. It is drawing out the drama, but it draws it so much that it's basically falling apart under its own weight.
Also, whoever was doing the cinematography and direction for this episode had heard of interesting camera shots and didn't know what to do with them, because they keep zooming in on people's lips when they say the code.
Dramatic.
Also, there
reaction.
Are 3 times when they set red alert, and the camera zooms in and out of the red alert light.
It's okay, now I'm getting dizzy. All right. We've never had red alert before on this show, guys. So obviously we have to do something special for it, right?
Yeah, so anyway, everything in this episode is just baffling.
Yes.
So just before the ship blows up, Beale gives in and Kirk turns off the self-destruct. This also takes about 2 minutes, but I guess it doesn't matter.
It's so we're in the final few seconds of the self-destruct, but we're going to put the countdown on hold while we go through the whole process to undo this.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow it just kind of works.
Kirk gets to finally go to Anaris to cure their infection thing, and he says that both of them should go about the ship and get to know humanity and such since they aren't trying to take over anymore. Sure.
Maybe get to know people, and interact, and maybe, I don't know, just chill until you take you back to the starbase so we get all this stuff sorted out there.
So later on in the rec room, a bunch of the crew are hanging out with Loki, who's explaining that he must have come off very badly to them because when, Beale's around, he gets very angry because this guy is the literal representation of all of the years of hatred and oppression that have, happened to him and his people. So he must seem kind of unhinged and upset when Beale's around, and that may make him seem like he's just reacting too strongly. But here, let me explain all of these horrible things that have happened calmly and lay it out for you. And maybe you guys can't fully understand because you've gotten rid of oppression on your planet.
So here are the reasons why I have this strong emotional reaction to whenever this guy's nearby. And it kind of makes sense. So here it is.
And we even see Spock pauses outside and listens to Loki's speech.
Maybe Spock's going to have some massive insight about the situation and has to go in and convince Kirk to make a decision to, basically toss Beale all overboard and take Loki somewhere safe.
Yeah, and you know what? This is a very, very good point that I feel like isn't made very often. That often when you are directly confronting someone who is espousing ideals and beliefs that are literally killing people that you care about, you're going to come off as very, very angry and upset, and maybe that makes you look a little irrational to the people around who are just observing this.
Yeah, a lot of folks have a inherent sort of visceral reaction to people that are upset. And so when you got the one person who's smiling and giving a thumbs up and saying the most, preaching the most awful things, and the other person who's like, no, that's awful, you're going to get us all killed, screw you, guy. It's just human reaction to react poorly to the second person, even though the content of what the first person is saying is actually just that ridiculous and awful.
Yeah, so it's actually a really good point. let's see what they do with it later on, shall we?
Okay, let's find out where this goes.
So in the captain's mess, they've invited Beale to dinner. I guess Lokai doesn't merit a dinner invitation.
So I guess we could, Kirk's okay with cops and no one else.
They're waiting to hear back from Starfleet on to whether Beale will be able to just take Lokai back with him after their mission is complete, or if they want to take him back to Starbase 4 to deal with the whole shuttlecraft thing.
Yeah, because there's some convoluted, jurisdiction sort of things here. And if Lokai did in fact steal the shuttle, the Federation might want to talk to him at least first.
Yeah, and they mentioned several times that the Federation and Sharon have no official political interaction. There's no extradition treaty. They basically vaguely know that the other exists, and that's about it.
Yeah, I haven't talked to each other in ages, but, there's the one planet out there, the Federation's over here, it's pretty far away, whatever.
So Starfleet's communication arrives, and they regret to inform them that both Lokai and Bale will be taken to Starbase 4 when all this is over. Bale is incensed and claims that Starfleet has now allied itself with Lokai and his inferior breeds.
Okay, so putting that last bit of comment aside, sir, what the hell?
So Spock points out that they are, in fact, the same species.
Yeah.
And he goes, you must be blind. And then he looks around. It's like, I am black on the right side. And Loki is white on the right side.
And that's the entirety of the difference between them.
Yep.
At least physiologically, different personalities, motivation.
This is the part of the episode everyone reviewed as heavy-handed and obvious.
Oh, yeah. I do occasionally on the show say that sometimes drawing a big circle about what's going on is totally okay. So I can sort of get behind this very obvious sort of, hey, look at this. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Sort of thing. But there's a lot of other problems with the episode still.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, this is fine. This is the science fiction equivalent of drawing the big red circle on your YouTube thumbnail, which can be fine.
Here's the point. Yes.
They just didn't do it at all. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
So Spock suggests that they should all just stop hating each other like how Vulcans did, because they were having trouble like this before, and they were just like, you know what? It's emotions that are the problem.
So we got rid of those, and suddenly we're not going to murder each other anymore or have oppression. Neat.
Beale doesn't think this will work, because, why do you think people like Lokai could be reasoned with?
All right, I understand you have some horrible biases against Lokai and his people that don't make any damn sense, but could you maybe give them a chance, something?
So now we've heard from both sides, and that seems to be about it. The ship reaches Anaris, completes its decontamination thingy, which takes way too long, and heads back for Starbase 4, but on course, Belial shows up, zaps the navigation system, zaps the self-destruct detonator thingy, takes control of the ship, and heads off to Charon with now absolutely nothing they can actually do about it.
So they have a power to control the ship, personal force fields, as now telekinetic powers that melt computers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're keeping a list of their powers that are just kind of out of nowhere. I will also like to point out that I believe either this bit or the previous time we took over the ship, they suddenly went over warp 10. So obviously everyone's going to turn to salamanders later.
Yes, and this just happens. They've gone over warp 10 lots of times on this show.
Just, it's always kind of find amusing.
Everyone's salamanders.
Yes.
They also have standard warp 13 at the end of Next Generation when they have the future episodes.
Maybe it's like transwarp, everything over 10 they count as that or something. I don't know.
They made all that up with Voyager later.
Yeah. No, there is a hard limit, and that's what we're going to go with for now.
So Lokai shows up on the bridge again, pointing out that Beale is doing something terrible, and maybe they should deal with him, even possibly resorting to physical violence.
Yes.
And they go, oh my God, how could you?
You're upset again, and apparently that's worse than the guy who's taking over the ship.
So Beale and Lokai start to actually physically fight each other, which is bumping force fields, and they're throwing off energy everywhere. And apparently that starts threatening the ship. So Kirk points out that they'll both just die uselessly in space. Like, Beale won't get to take back his prisoner, and Lokai won't be able to inspire his rebellion. So,
Maybe, I don't know. Don't destroy us, please. Yeah.
Yeah, they say that Beale is too obsessed with, like, catching people and is angry, but also Lokai's wrong because he's, like, inspiring rebellion, but he hasn't died in it yet.
Maybe he had a lot of companions that inspired him originally, and they're now all dead. Ever think about that, Kirk?
So they have now made it to Sharon after all of this, and they put it on the view screen, and it's destroyed.
Oh, Tomb World. I can colonize that.
Yeah, you knew where this was going.
Yeah.
While Beale was busy chasing Lokai, the conflict between their two peoples resulted in a war that killed everyone on the planet.
Absolutely everyone. The bodies are still there, apparently.
Yep. So it must have happened, like, in the last year or so. Maybe. Maybe sooner.
Yeah, maybe just like earlier that day.
So Lokai runs off, and Beale chases him, and they both run to the transporter and beam down to the dead world, and Uhura and Sulu go, but that doesn't make any sense, all their people are dead, why are they continuing this? And Kirk goes, well, people with extreme viewpoints, you know.
Too unreasonable to, join a federation of planets and chill, man.
And at the end of the day, they were left with nothing but their hatred for each other.
Ugh, man, that was painful.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah. Also, I do want to mention that there is some dramatic footage as they're running through the ship and getting on the transporter and having visions of burning buildings, and they're sort of flailing around like they're exhausted. And it's all very dramatic, and it's like...
Yeah, this is just it's so bad. Like, it looks like they're slowly jogging down a hallway and go, my arms are tired and floppy, but I can't run faster than the camera can move backward, as the 60s and the camera weighs 100 pounds.
Yes, I have to struggle to run slower.
Alright, so there's a lot of stuff wrong with this episode. Well, I feel like the most relevant one, and something that we hear talked about a lot, is something called false equivalency.
So what is false equivalency?
So it's also called informally the balance fallacy. It's not a traditional, logical fallacy per se, but it is basically one that can be used. So the balance or false equivalency fallacy is that if there is a problem with two opposing viewpoints, they are always equal and the answer is always in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
This is often kind of a sort of inverse of what's called the false dilemma, which is when you say there are only two extremes instead of there being a middle. This is, we need to discount both extremes and something in the middle will be true, which is kind of...
That doesn't follow.
You're just discounting both sides. You're saying that each of the extremes is wrong when you actually have no particular evidence that one is completely wrong, or you actually have evidence that one is wrong and one is correct.
And it's basically an attempt to discourage disagreement. That via this fallacy, we can establish that there is always going to be the centralized correct answer, even if the two sides are completely mismatched in what they're all about.
Yeah, what it basically comes down to is that having an extreme viewpoint is the problem, regardless of what that viewpoint is.
And so you get situations like, side A is like, let's murder everybody that is like this. Side B is like, let's not murder anyone. And the centralized, opinion here, based on the false equivalence is let's maybe only murder half of everybody.
Yeah, let's just murder some people.
Yes, which is still horrific.
You get this false compromise idea. It is a way to kind of, it normalizes harmful viewpoints because you say, well, there has to be a compromise and both sides have to give up something, so let's murder some of the people. There was a saying I came across while I was researching this, that half a kitten is not half as cute.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to use that at some point. I mean, not in a graphic fashion. When I'm running into someone who's being awful about this sort of thing.
So it's used a lot now. It's more relevant to this episode than some of the other ideas, because I was researching some other things that it kind of hints at, like respectability politics, which we could talk about. But the episode itself falls into the false equivalency idea more, because this is something that often happens with media outlets, and it's something that we often criticize large newspapers and journalistic endeavors for, because they often have to present both sides equally to avoid the appearance of bias, because you're not supposed to editorialize or take sides when you're reporting news stories.
So you get one politician saying, it's like, oh, yes, maybe if we drink bleach, we'll be able to combat the virus. And everyone else saying, that's idiotic, don't drink bleach. But they report on both of these because these are the two sides that are being presented. And, it's like, if we make, a decision on our reporting side of thing to say that one of these is actually correct, then, we could get slammed for being too partisan or too biased or too favoring certain people over the others, and then you don't have any sort of weight to any of these two different options. And that could potentially lead to people sort of taking ones like, well, that means I could choose, right? I could choose which one of these to believe more actively, because there isn't anyone here giving a more solid, clear, this is more, the correct answer versus the other one.
This is demonstrated in this episode because Kirk is supposed to be this external person. Often this is someone in a power position. Kirk is shown to not exactly be in a power position in this situation, even though because it's his show, he's always in the power position no matter what. Mm-hmm. So he is an external observer who is supposed to be neutral to both sides of this argument in a power position, who gets to decide that both of these extreme viewpoints are wrong, and they just need to stop hating each other.
Just hug it out, man. Then all the problems, all those centuries of oppression, they'll just sort of evaporate,
Which is something that you get a lot of, especially when we're talking about race politics in the United States, because you have yes, it is wrong that you are oppressing this group and you should maybe stop advocating the oppression of this group. But it's also wrong that you, the oppressed group, are still bothered by the fact that this person's oppressing you.
No, I think they're quite right that they should be bothered that people are oppressing them still. And, making noise about it, that should be a thing, and that should be normalized, accepted. Because when people are being forced to suffer, they have a right to say, hey, let's cut this crap out.
But this is an argument that they actually made in the episode that say, slavery ended hundreds of years ago, so they say, so you should stop being bothered by it.
We also established these guys are 50,000 years old. So Lokai was probably a slave at some point, given that, for starters.
Yeah, you can't do it with that kind of lifespan thing.
Investment, yeah. But even if without that, there is going to be legacy problems of the oppression there that are going to be left over. You don't just suddenly wave a magic wand and suddenly everyone has equal rights all across the board. And it's kind of ridiculous that was sort of being argued here in this episode.
Yeah. So the weird thing with this, especially this episode, because they're showing one side as unquestionably wrong. Mm-hmm. This guy is basically a space Nazi. He's advocating racial purity. He's thinks that the people with the other black-white divide are an inferior breed of his own species. He thinks slavery is the best thing for them. He is the worst person. And in addition to advocating all of these definitely wrong viewpoints that we should be able to easily identify as negative, he also attacks and takes over the ship.
Mm-hmm. So basically he's drawn attention to himself that he is basically the worst sort of person, and you should be actively opposing this person, Captain Kirk, because he is not only an awful person in what he's trying to do, what he has done in the past, but he's also messing with your ship.
But the other side was near stolen property, because there's even a scene at dinner where they say that they can't agree that Lokai's a criminal. They can just agree that he was in possession of a stolen shuttlecraft.
Yeah, it's a little late, Kirk, but yeah.
So he was near stolen property, and he came off as somewhat rude.
And thus, They are exactly as terrible as the person that would be okay with their death.
Yeah, the only thing that they really call out that Lokai does is he comes in and says, you should kill him, he's taking over your ship, which admittedly is a slightly more extreme reaction than they would have, but only because they routinely have non-lethal means of incapacitating someone in a modern, imagine this being a modern military scenario, they would 100% just shoot the guy who's taking over the ship.
Yep. So, yeah, this is a little bit before tasers were very well known.
So, the only reason that saying you should kill the guy who's putting your entire ship and crew in danger is seen as extreme is because they have a non-lethal alternative that, in fact, Lokai may or may not have known.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, you guys seem to have guns everywhere. These are obviously weapons of war, weapons to kill people. So go ahead and use them because obviously you're going to need that given what's going on. So why are you not doing this? Come on, guys, this is obvious.
And you get into you two are both wrong. I'm going to politely ask him to stop, which fine. He politely asked him to stop, and then he didn't. And then you wound up having to try to shoot him anyway. But you tried to shoot both of them because, Lokai's over there yelling.
He's too annoying to not be stunned, so stun them both. We'll sort out the bodies later.
Which gets into the same idea that Beale, as the establishment, he is literally working for his government, supposedly. Mm-hmm. We have no actual evidence for this. He calls himself a commissioner and says that he's affiliated with a law-keeping organization. So he is the establishment person.
You could be making that up.
He gets to have credibility regardless of what he does because he is an establishment person. Lokai has lost all credibility irrevocably because he was near stolen property. He was associated with a crime. He didn't even necessarily commit one.
Yeah, there's evidence there, but it does not say that he was there when the shuttle was stolen. As I mentioned earlier, it could have been he ran into whoever had stolen it, and they gave him the shuttle. It's like, oh yeah, you could have the shuttle. I'm leaving here. Have fun.
Yeah, he's even says that he didn't steal the shuttle, and even if he did, he's fleeing someone who's actively trying to kill him.
So there might be extenuating circumstances to motivate appropriations.
But the entire episode is both sides are just wrong. And this is, this episode came out in 69, mm-hmm. Which means we are well into the civil rights movement.
Indeed. In fact, there was some assassinations of some major figures before this point, right?
Yeah, which calling out Lokai as wrong for trying to improve his people's situation as a revolutionary because he has not yet been assassinated.
Yeah,
pretty tasteless given the timing of this episode.
Exactly. It's like you can only be a true civil rights pioneer if you end up dead. That's ridiculous. You should not need to martyr yourself in order for your cause to be seen as just.
And you shouldn't be calling for revolution because that's just blanket wrong. No matter how screwed up the system is, you shouldn't be calling to upend it. You should be asking for small incremental changes or possibly compromising and saying, well, maybe only some of us should be slaves then.
So yeah.
Which is in fact what happened in several different eras of false equivalency things. The Missouri Compromise in the United States, the Compromise of 1850, trying to reach a middle ground between pro-slavery and abolitionist politics.
Yeah, we'll sort of keep the power balanced here, guys, and hopefully we can sustain this forever because make-believe.
So I could just go on and on with this. I do feel like it's worth pointing out. So I mentioned it before, the difference between this false equivalency thing where Kirk is saying that both of them are the same despite their arguments, and the respectability politics, which this also touches on a little bit. Respectability politics being that you, in order to be taken seriously or be worthy, basically, of rights and full citizenship and all the rest, you need to maintain a certain respectability. Don't act out. Don't be upset. Act the same way as everyone else. Basically, elevate yourself so that you no longer appear to be poor or a minority. Just like act like the majority group wants you to, and then you will be able to pull yourself out of your horrible situation. The main difference here is that respectability politics is a self-enforced system. It's people within the minority group usually enforcing this idea on other members of the minority group who are in a worse position.
It's like, oh, you're not, obviously the reason that you're suffering is not because the system's bad, but because you are not emulating the people that are pressing you enough.
Yeah, the whole idea is, I was reading an article in this that kind of had an interesting link, an article by Frederick C. Harris, who is the professor of political science and the director of Center of African American Politics and Society at Columbia University, so I think he probably knows a little bit more about this than I do. He basically is arguing that the basic argument of respectability politics is if you act in such a way that you are more appealing to enter the job market and workplace, then you can have the same economic opportunities for improvement as someone who is not in the oppressed minority group, and therefore you will all sort of lift yourselves out of this minority oppression position.
It kind of leaves out the whole other people having input on your fate in these sort of situations. Some people, might be like, oh yes, I will endorse this sort of view of the world and respond as this guy sort of lays out. But there's other people that are going to be like, no, I still think you're awful because I'm a racist bigot, and so they will still keep trying to keep you under their boot.
Yeah, but the idea behind it and the reason that it is sort of self-enforced inside of minority groups is the basic idea of like, I, as someone who have been able to elevate my position somewhat through some means, am following the rules. I am dressing correctly and acting correctly and entering the marketplace and following the rules laid out by the majority groups in the society. And you, who are not, are the reason that I am treated badly because you are perpetuating the stereotypes that people are foisting upon me.
It becomes sort of self-destructive inside a community with that sort of dynamic. And kind of sucks. Yeah.
But as I said, this one, since the only groups we see here are one oppressive group and one oppressed group, and the decision maker gets to be Kirk, who decides that both extreme viewpoints are equally bad, it's not a self-enforced within the minority group system.
Yeah, unless Kirk is somehow trying to place himself in the role of the minority group here, and that's just even worse.
But it gets the reason that it kind of parallels the respectability is because Kirk is able to just immediately discount any argument that Lokai has because he was too close to a stolen object and came off as somewhat angry.
Oh, did you know Lokai also smoked pot once?
Yeah, it is that kind of, he was standing next to a car that was later stolen, therefore he is a criminal and we don't have to listen to him.
Yeah, and if he happens to get shot in the back while he's trying not to be shot in the back, then that's his fault in that case, right?
Well, he shouldn't have been threatening people while running away.
I've read a few articles sort of on this stuff recently. I'm just like, I'm so tired of this happening over and over again.
Yeah. That's basically where I'm at.
I want to turn to something a little more historical.
Sure.
All right. Watch this episode, and this sort of false equivalence, nonsense here got me thinking about Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln was president during the Civil War. Except for the very beginning of it, and he's often credited as being the guy that freed the slaves, Emancipation Proclamation, all that sort of stuff. In more detail, though, he was actually more of the moderate position as far as the liberation of the slaves was concerned. He was in part behind some ideas like, oh yeah, they should set up a colony in Central America or something like that once all the Civil War business is done with. And well, the people, the freedmen were kind of like, no, we kind of like it here in the U.S. We don't want to leave. Everyone we know is here. So that wasn't much of a starter there. And sort of working in the period between the end of the war and assassination, there was sort of putting in place a reconstruction program to try to reintegrate the southern states back into the country. And this whole entire process and the time period it takes place in is often called the Reconstruction era. And it sort of had several different sort of ways it went forward in different times. Because, as I said, Lincoln was more of this sort of modern, it's like, oh yeah, we'll sort of be cool with them. They're not going to be slaves anymore, but they're maybe not going to be totally on equal footing as the white folks at this point. And then he got himself assassinated, and Andrew Johnson, who was basically, screw that noise, let's just kind of ignore the problem and just bring the southern states back in without changing anything up. And so then the folks at the North were like, I don't think so. So the next congressional election, the radical Republicans got a firm majority of the situation and started putting through things like constitutional amendments to guarantee the right to vote and citizenship and all that sort of stuff. And by and putting in contingencies like, you can come back into the Union, but you need to have these sort of check boxes sort of marked off, like your state constitution has to be rewritten and ban slavery, for instance. You have to approve of these amendments we're trying to get through, all that sort of stuff. And so Andrew Johnson's like, well, I'm just going to veto stuff, but the people in Congress are like, no. Also, the South keeps trying to send representatives up here to Congress, and we're just not seating them because they were actually just Confederate officers, and their elections aren't legitimate at all. And so you have these sort of three different lanes of former slaveholders / folks that fought for the Confederacy, basically wanting to return to how things were before the Civil War. Maybe not bring back slavery, but if you could, that'd be great. Then you had, folks like Lincoln and to a lesser extent Johnson, who were like, we can get this all reconciled. We're going to try to get back to healing, man. And if no one gets all their rights, then that's not a problem. Then you have the radical Republicans who are very much more like, no, we actually need to solve the problem. And so, Johnson was president for a few years. Andrew Johnson specifically, because there is a Lyndon Johnson, but he was next century. And he was replaced by Ulysses S. Grant. What else is Grant known for, Gepwin?
Drinking a lot.
Okay, the other thing.
Leading the Union Army in the Civil War.
Yeah, so maybe he had a little bit of a personal motivation to be like, no, we need to make sure this crap doesn't happen again. And so he, picked up a lot of the methods and ideas of the radical Republicans and started pushing them forward. Stationed troops in the South, had them basically hunt down the Ku Klux Klan. And it's like, you're not going to be doing this paramilitary stuff anymore. And no more massacres. We're going to be done with that. And we're going to make sure it's all 100% done. And so, he was president for a while. And then you have the election of 1876. So speaking of horrible compromises, guess what happened there?
Oh, I don't remember that one.
All right. So it was, I think Tilden versus Rutherford B. Hayes, if I recall correctly. And Hayes was the Republican candidate. And he was not, really of the radical Republican sort of style. He's more of a, I guess you could call them more liberal Republicans from the North. And Tilden, well, he, Democrat from the South. This is the 19th century, so generally Democrats from the South were, well, the ones that had been running the Confederacy. And so you get this sort of very close election where these amazing things like in South Carolina, 101% voter turnout somehow. And so a lot of people were like, I think there is maybe some voter fraud here, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. And so there was different slates of electors that, had cast their vote for president for, the presidential election. And when they got to, when they were kind of on their way to Congress, it's like, okay, so who actually counts these votes? Because there are some states that have multiple different votes slates coming in. We should maybe figure out what's going on here. And so they did. They came with the compromise of, how was it? 1876, I believe. Or 77? I forget. It's one of those years where it's like, okay, so we'll let Rutherford B. Hayes actually get elected, but we have to bring Reconstruction to a close. And so the Reconstruction period, where they're very actively trying to prevent the restoration of basically Confederate rule in the South, came to a kind of quick end. And so within a few decades, you had the rise of Jim Crow laws like all across the South, and the numbers of African American legislators and Congress people from the South basically evaporated as suddenly the controls that had been put in place to ensure their enfranchisement just kind of fell apart and weren't there to protect them anymore, and massive corruption from the folks running the states. And suddenly it's a one-party state all across the South, and, well, the people that had been enslaved before are now completely out of power, and they'll be lucky if they can even vote. So yeah, I kind of don't like that. That's it, and ending there.
Well, something that we kind of forget was, Reconstruction went for a while, suddenly got ended, and a lot of it was reversed and undone. But even during something more recent, like something that would have been fairly fresh when this episode was around, having to do with civil rights eras, there were, like, even in that era and going up to it, there were actual, like, political coups and assassinations. Like, there were plenty of African Americans who were holding office in the years after the Civil War. Like, they were in state governments. Some of them were elected to, like, were going to be elected to, like, the federal, like, Senate and things. And many of them were actively assassinated. And there were full-on coups where a white nationalist government was installed in various states. So this is a part of history that we kind of ignore. Where, like, this is just, progress is just always slow, and we always have to compromise, and that's why it takes a long time, and we should all be happy with this. But it wasn't slow, it was undone and ignored.
So, all this, I mentioned earlier, this sort of, it's like, oh, slavery's over, and so magically all our problems are over with. No, that's not how this thing works. Because we have a very real world situation, United States, where, even with, some folks pushing hard to basically make sure that the changes stick, it can be, easily undone, because it's like, oh yeah, I want to be president more than I want to keep these reforms in and these safeguards. Yeah.
And, something that's always bugged me in the way that we talk about, cultural advancement, and especially civil rights in particular. We always share these stories of, like, all of the nonviolent protests and all of the police violence and all of the people who, did do protests or led some of these actions and were assassinated or killed, or, all the various horrible things that happened to all civil rights leaders, but also a lot of people who were just there. And we talk about it like it's the normal consequence and kind of just the price for improving your situation. As well, of course, you're going to have to, do this and get killed and whatever. And that's just how things advance. It sucks, but it's normal in the way things are.
Suffering is the only way to change.
Yeah, like this suffering, a lot of the suffering and killing stuff was completely unnecessary. The people in charge were ignoring that it was happening and not executing the amount of power they had that would allow them to stop it. Like, there was just a lot of unnecessary suffering and death.
Yeah.
That's not to, like, diminish the amount of stuff that was done. There was a massive amount of courage shown by the people who spearheaded civil rights and got all of those reforms and the amount of progress that they did make. Like, this isn't to say anything against that or belittle their accomplishment in any way, but the suffering and death that was seen as a natural consequence of that was unnecessary. It was something that was foisted upon them by external forces that were not even particularly mainstream. They were just more acceptable to the mainstream.
The sacred sacrifice for the good cause. And never question that there are people forcing this sacrifice on people. Mm-hmm. They're the in group over here, and we can't upset them.
All right, so do you want to end on something less depressing before we move to our game shows?
Okay, I do want to say one more time, screw you, Rutherford B. Hayes. You're like the third worst person I can think of right now. But go ahead.
All right, I just wanted to very briefly touch on, which we kind of already have, the way that they thought that the bilateral coloration was so strange and could never occur, and oh my god, we do have an example of this that happens in nature on Earth now.
Surprise! So, McCoy's full of crap.
There are some animals that just have this as a somewhat natural coloration. It's not usually that stark, but something that happens all the time, especially in insects and birds, but sometimes in other animals, is something called bilateral gynomorphy.
Gynomorphic?
Yes.
It's
a bilateral gynandromorph.
Trying to look it up here. So don't worry about spelling. I'll worry about it.
Basically, it is an animal that is bifurcated down the middle, and one half of the animal is male and the other half is female.
Huh. Neat.
And it's pretty easy to see in things like insects and birds because they have very strong sexual dimorphism, which is to say that the sexes look very, very different from one another.
So you get, like a cardinal, one side will be very red, the other will be a bit more dull.
Yes.
Sort of situation there.
That's a pretty common one, or a butterfly where they have one huge colorful male wing and one slightly smaller, less colorful female wing.
It must be a little hard to fly with.
One would imagine. And this happens all the time. So when they showed up and they said, there's no way this could happen. It's well, we don't know. We don't know what the males and females on this planet look like. Maybe they all look like this because they, are just all they stopped being a multi-gendered species or a multi-sexed species, and they all just are bilateral gynandromorphs, and that's how they breed.
Which, I guess, maybe the black and the white side is more, has a, sexual connotation for, why Bale's so disgusted. It's I was told from the very beginning that this is the only way to have your sex organs arranged. And anything else is forbidden, and even if it's just personal preference here. And thus, I have to turn that into a whole thing, and then everybody else decide to do the same thing. That kind of suck.
So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. And you can kind of sound out gyandromorph if you want to see pictures of this.
Gyandromorph. When I was trying to look it up, I just kept on coming up with hypergeometric series, but it's a little different.
That happens in nature a lot, and you can find this. If you search for bird that's half male and half female, you'll also get a lot of pictures of it, so it's just kind of interesting.
Very cool, very cool. The more you know. Do.
All right, so we've had enough depressing junk for this hour, so I think now it's time for the Galaxy's favorite game show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Galaxy's favorite game show, where our various contestants have been competing for a very long and drawn-out sort of adventure here. Do we need any more filler, Gepwin, or are we good?
I think we're good.
Okay. Our first prize is the Tragedy of Errors prize, which goes to the people of Sharon who were just too racist to keep themselves from self-destructing. What do they win, Gepwin?
They win the Break the Chains. A lot of broken chains prize, because I don't want to speak for everyone. I imagine that the revolution was kind of it's better if we die than live as oppressed slaves for thousands and thousands of years. So in one way, the revolution kind of won.
It's we've been liberated, just maybe not in the way we wanted to, but we are liberated.
But that's kind of the revolution idea, isn't it? It's better to risk all dying than to live like this.
Indeed. But I guess they just weren't given a choice there. That kind of sucks. Well, let's go to the next award before we get more depressed here. Are we the guest stars? That prize is going to the crew of the Enterprise for really not having much agency in this episode at all. What? Things just sort of happen. Why do they win, Gepwin?
I think Kirk and the Gring get to win some more awkward and possibly revealing costumes. Kirk would like that. So that's what the guest stars wear, right? We need to give them like half a dress.
Indeed. Though today's guest stars were just wearing really tight clothing. That was kind of revealing.
Awkwardly tight.
Yeah. Let's get Kirk in a dress, and Spock can have like this open chest sort of vest thing going on. I think that'd be pretty cool. Our third and final award for today is the Power Creep Prize, which goes to Lokai and Beale for steadily having more superpowers that the longer they're in the episode, they just seem to come out of nowhere. Why do they win, Gepwin?
They win an account on one of those online RPGs creative writing things that was popular when I was a teenager. It's like, my character could totally win in a fight, but if you pull out a power, then this is why I could win, but I see why you could win, but I could definitely win.
Yeah, those often had a really long, drawn-out death spiral because of that problem. I may have experienced one of them myself.
This is why D&D has dice.
Yes, and some sort of moderating influence so that things just don't get too bizarre with the bang bang you're dead nonsense. So that's all I got for prizes, Gepwin. Go ahead and take us away.
All right, thank you for all of our guest stars. Oh, they're all dead because they're racist.
Whoops.
And thank you for joining us on the Galaxy's Favorite Game Show!
Oh, yay. Before we get to the next, time here stuff, I have two things that are on my mind right now.
Yes.
So first off, the outcome of the citizens of Sharon coming to an ultimate end in their struggle against each other reminds me of that Wax World episode of Red Dwarf.
I know you've mentioned this one before.
Yeah. the obvious evil people versus like the obvious good guys. Except the problem there was more just one of incompetent leadership. The other thing that was stuck in my mind today is that from the previous episode, Whom Gods Destroy, obviously the entire time Garth is clearly naked.
True, he's just transforming himself into have different clothes.
Yeah, that's pretty lewd. That's all I had.
Oh, the next episode is another one that I hadn't heard of called Mark of Gideon.
Yes, I think I've seen like a few minutes of this.
Yeah, you will recognize the costumes like from the screenshots. You'll be able there's some iconic blue costumes, and there's a bald guy with a mustache who like apparently died recently, unfortunately, but went on to play kind of an admiral in Next Gen for one episode and a couple of other bit roles on later Star Trek series. So the basic gist of this one, as I understand, is there's a planet that they are trying to interview for Federation membership. They agree that Kirk can beam down, and he beams down, and instead everyone in the Enterprise disappears, and he's the only one left on the ship except for a beautiful woman, obviously.
Wait a moment, is this another Mirror Universe sort of thing?
It might be. It's a bottle episode. It's one of these. It's just Kirk alone on the ship with some lady, which is like It's either like the most boring. It's probably alternating between the most boring episode ever and the most cringy episode ever.
I guess we'll get into the details here. I don't want to spoil too much on it here, but there is some sort of evil plan afoot, and it's kind of terrible, but not. Well, it is terrible in the very like this is bad, but also terrible as in this is kind of dumb.
Yeah, I'm trying not to give too much away, but I do know the whole plot of this one. And oh my god, if you thought we got into some crummy politics with this one.
Oh man, I'm not looking forward to this.
Yeah, but if that's something that we have to worry about and you don't have to think about till next week on Watches of Tomorrow.
Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, the worst, most convoluted plan yet. You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. Find and follow Watchers of Tomorrow on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Spreader, Digital Podcast, and perhaps many more to come. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more. And where possible, make sure to rate your experience or leave us a review. You may find Gepwin on youtube.com/Gepwin and Twitter @Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix and Twitter @IsixLP. Music is Waveform and Mori's Principle, both by DRKRN. You can also check out the Watchers of Tomorrow Discord channel. Make sure to share the experience with your friends, family, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, that you, that is now, no longer exists.